Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody to Board Bootcamp Session 3, Special Forces, all about independent directors. I'm Kristen with the UNI Family Business Center, and we are joined today by two nationally respected voices in family business governance. We have Joe Ayoub and Dennis Kessler. And we're going to learn about what independent directors are, why they matter, and how to bring them into your board effectively. So, um, we'll say, starting with Joe, he blends legal expertise with governance strategy, and he's the founder of Varuna Strategies and co-host of On Board's podcast. And Dennis brings decades of leadership experience, including his time in his own family business and now as founder of Midwest Family Business Advisors. Um, Starting out, Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everyone. As Kristen said, I was a trial lawyer for over 25 years. I represented a lot of families in litigation, in trials, usually business disputes. And over the years, that led me to their boardroom so I could know the company better. And because I also became their legal advisors. And what I saw in many of the boardrooms was surprising to me. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to do after my years as a trial lawyer, this is what came up was helping private and public companies with governance. And so I founded a company called Varuna Strategies. We advise, but we also recruit board members for both public and private companies. And it's been 15 years. It's been a great opportunity for me to really be involved in the governance world in a way that I hadn't been before. And as Kristen said, I also have a podcast which I co-host um, called On Boards, and it's about issues in the boardroom. It's for board members, for people that want to be board members. It's for all stakeholders, investors, and it's been running um, since 2019. We're the second longest podcast talking about boardroom governance. So it's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Joe, for being here. And Dennis, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you, Kristen. Nice to meet all of you guys virtually. I've been very fortunate. I've been part of our family business most of my career. It was a manufacturing business in a suburb of Chicago, Skokie, Illinois, and we had a great family business. Fortune magazine ranked us as the fourth best company to work for in America. Yeah, and that and Illinois voted us the best manufacturer in the state, and it was our son was the fifth generation of our family that owned and operated the business. We ended up selling it in 1998. It was a company called Felpro, and I needed a third, what I call third age career, so I opened up my own family business, consulting business, helping family businesses with strategic planning, succession planning, conflict resolution, board governance, and during the last few years, I've served on 8 different corporate boards, both public, private, ESOP, startups, and one of the founders of the Private Directors Association, which we'll talk about later throughout the program. So glad to be here. Thank you, Daniel and Kirsten. A pleasure.
Great, thank you. I'm going to start off with just a couple of questions. This one for Joe. So your podcast gives you a front row seat to boardroom dynamics across many different industries. What themes come up again and again when boards struggle?
Um, well, I one of the things my podcast partner and I discuss all the time is that the most difficult thing is offboarding. And I think if you think about that, it leads to a real understanding of how important it is to onboard. So even the best board chairs, the best CEOs often have a very difficult time getting in a cadence where they're assessing the boards and asking people off. And I see later in the deck, we'll talk a little bit about this, but that is the thing that leads us to talk about how important onboarding is. And you're going through the process of some of the things you do when you bring on board members. It's so important because, as I say to clients all the time, it's easy to ask someone onto your board. It's not always so easy to ask them off.
That seems like the harder part of the equation there. So great. And Dennis, you guided some families through some tough transitions. What's one lesson you wish every family business learned earlier?
Earlier is the key word. Start early. It's probably next to what Joe just talked about offboarding on the transition to the next generation is probably one of the hardest things from both aspects, from the next generation as well as the senior generation letting go. So it takes a long time to make sure that the next generation is adequately prepared and ready to go. And it takes, unfortunately, sometimes a long time to convince dad or mom that it's time to let go a little bit. It's like sending your kid off to college. Oh my gosh, they're not going to be here all the time and listening to me. No. So it's time to let go. So I think succession planning is key and
Yeah,
do it as early as you can.
I love
Yeah,
the
I
analogy.
heard that
I
come
love
up a
the
lot
analogy
too.
there. Yeah. What are they going to do without us?
Okay, so jumping in, we're walking through the full journey of independent directors from why they matter to how you recruit, onboard, and retain them. So this is kind of like a roadmap you can use right away. So to both of you, if you had to pick the single most important part of this journey, the part that families most often underestimate, what would it be?
Of the entire recruitment journey?
Yeah, of the whole process.
Dennis, go ahead.
Well, I think I think we don't talk enough about culture. Maybe this group does, but often the people that I no, we're looking for skills. We're looking for somebody that's got all the skills that we need. We need strategic planning or what our marketing. We're really hurting in marketing, whatever. And those are important, but it's really important to have a cultural fit that the expert that you're putting on your board for good reasons will fit in and be listened to. And I think we'll touch on it. I think it's slide 16 or something.
You're
Um,
ready for it.
yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. Of the four on the screen, building your board profile, I'd pick out because what I tell clients is, it's if your company has a strategic plan, you don't just put it on the shelf, when it's done and look at it when it's time for a new plan. You got to look at it all the time. And so thinking about what your board profile should be is something that should be done every year. It's because if you think about it, it's like strategic planning for your board. What Dennis said is absolutely true. So when you're thinking about the profile, it's not just about skills and experience, it's about attributes as well. Sometimes, depending on the client, I'll talk about sports analogies. When you're drafting, you're in basketball or football, whatever your sport is, it's not just talent. Talent is important, position's important, but is this person going to fit onto the team and make our team better? And that really is how you're looking or should be looking, I think, and how you recruit board members.
Right. So naming the elephant in the room, and I'm talking about that elephant. I'm acknowledging, bringing outsiders into the family decision making feels uncomfortable for a lot of family businesses. Um, I think that discomfort is normal and it's, excuse me, not a sign that you're making the wrong move, but if they embrace outside perspective on their own terms, that can really build stronger, longer lasting enterprises. Dennis, you've seen families wrestle with this discomfort. What helps them get over the initial fear of, I guess, losing control?
Well, the first thing for a family to realize, maybe the CEO, the family that's the person that's a family member, that's a CEO and been running the company and building up a nice company for years, he or she, they have to get over the fact that they don't have all the answers. So it's a personality kind of question. Am I willing to admit to my family that we need other experts in the room who have answers that I don't have? And it's okay for me to not have the answer and for me to be open to new ideas in front of my family. So that hurdle, once you get over that hurdle, and I've seen family presidents, CEOs running a business who have made that transition to, yeah, I'm the boss. I know everything. I run everything. We got it all under control, family. Don't worry about a thing. To, well, we're doing pretty good, but boy, we could always do better. Continuous improvement. I'm all for it. Let's get in some experts in this particular field that we're going to be facing for the first time over the next 5 years or so. So it's getting over that hurdle of I don't know everything, and it's okay for me to expose to the family that I don't know everything, and we need the best experts we can find to guide us.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. The fear about losing control is not reality based. There's no reason to lose control. There are so many things you can do with your board in a private setting to control what I was going to say the jury, that's coming from older days, what the board can really do. And what I've worked with companies that were starting, family companies that were starting their very first board, and work with lawyers to put language in wherever it is. It could be the shareholder agreement, it could be other places, and what the board can or cannot do, or what kind of vote it takes for certain decisions. So, as an example, one board I helped build from scratch, the two owners, two family owners, um, they required that they their vote would be necessary for certain very, very important decisions. So they would know that those decisions would never get made unless they wanted it to be made. So they still had the benefit of the board, but some measure of control. And I would say that it's really not that hard to find a comfort zone so that you are not worried about losing control. And the other thing I'd say is instead of being worried about losing control, I'd be worried about not having a board that's up to your family business. Because if you're relying only on family members, as Dennis said, no family has all the skills and the experience and other attributes that your business leads. It's almost impossible if you think about it. I know there's obviously a trust because they're family members, but that goes into recruiting the right people. There are people that love to be in family business boards and who are incredibly dedicated to helping family businesses grow and thrive. So I wouldn't focus on worrying about the losing of control. I'd worry more about how do I have the best board that is best for the company and ultimately best for my family.
And what would you say to the owners who worry an independent director might judge their family dynamics?
I'd
Get over it.
I would recruit more carefully because the people are going to say things and obviously express their opinion. But if you're feeling that you're being judged, then maybe the person should be in the boardroom because this is not about judging. It is really about how to. The thing about having a great board is you have people in the room, as if it's a fiduciary board, who have a legal obligation to your company. Their job is to make your company as good as it can possibly be. That's an amazing thing. So, yeah, there may be times when you could be doing things better, but you don't have to put up with people that are judging you. So I would say recruit the right people. You'll feel comfortable with them. And over time, I mean, I've never seen it, when it's done right, I've never seen it not work. If you recruit the right people, it is additive. And over time, the one thing that sometimes happens, we'll get to this in a later slide, is the independent board members get so uh, get to know the family so well, get to be so much a part of their business that they lose their independence. I've seen people step off of boards because they didn't think they were independent enough long anymore because they become so involved with the family, and that happens. That happens regularly.
Interesting. All right.
Which is also just another reason to put term limits in, right? And not have to have those awkward conversations on the back end, which maybe,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's true. A lot of people think of that as rough justice, but it's better than not doing anything. There are later on we'll talk about some of the things you can do when you're onboarding to begin the conversation about, when the time comes that you're going to offboard.
So just discussing what independence actually means. So it's not about personality, it's more about structural freedom from bias. They have no financial stake, no family loyalty, no employment ties, no long history. And like you said, yeah, if they've been on the board that long, they've gotten to know the family, and that starts to kind of diminish over time. But it's really allowing these directors to speak their truth without any fear. I mean, there's no repercussions from it. So what which of these criteria do you think families most often misunderstand?
Well, I think all of them. I don't know that I would pick out one of them. They're all things that I've seen on boards as I've helped them restructure their board. Often when family businesses start, they have their lawyer and their accountant. Certainly we did it in my company. And that's just natural. They're the people you go to who you have a good relationship with. But in fact, you shouldn't have your lawyer and your accountant or any of your vendors because look, individually, maybe there's no conflict of interest, if they do their job right, but there tends to be, and it's subconscious sometimes. So it's best to not have them as a member of your voting board. And there's at some place we ought to talk about the difference between a fiduciary and advisory board. And But it's okay for them, the lawyers, your accountants, your advice, to come as guests on a particular topic where you need their expertise. So it's not that they should be excluded from the board meetings. They should be invited when it's appropriate to give their expertise on that particular subject. But you can't always count on them to give you really independent advice. They've got their own subconscious interests to continue to be your lawyer and your accountant and to tell you what they think you want to hear. It's just human nature.
Puts them in a tough spot, that's for sure.
I agree with every word. I mean, amen. And I just add, reinforce what you said. You can always go to them for advice. You can always bring them into the boardroom when the situation arises. There's no reason to bring them in the boardroom. You should have other areas of expertise with people who are not in any way, I don't want to use the word beholden because you can have a great relationship with your lawyer or your accountant or any of the professionals, but you don't want people that are in any way influenced by the relationship they have with your family as they come on the board. You want their true independent thinking. So well said, Dennis. I think the days when people thought that was okay, I think are behind us. I mean, it still happens, but I think it is more and more understood that you don't want the first stop is not people you actually know that work for you. That is
One
not,
other footnote, when my generation was asked to join our company board, and we went to our first meeting, there were three of us in my generation that joined the board at that time, and we went to our first board meeting. We couldn't believe it. It was the accountant and the lawyer and the senior family members, and it wasn't anything like any of you could think of as a real board meeting. And our generation said, wait, we got to have a real board. And but it was difficult to fire my father-in-law and uncle and so forth.
yeah,
So
there is
we
that.
that was a fiduciary board. And what we decided is why don't we add an advisory board? And if we have time, we can explain the difference between fiduciary and advisory board. But we ended up having, if you will, two boards, a fiduciary board, and the lawyer and the accountant stayed on there. And then we had an advisory board where we recruited some really top talent to, and some of the family, and we added some management as well to our board to get real diversity of background and advice.
Yeah, and my comment is, Dennis, good for you guys to really recognize what you're seeing and to actually take action. Good for the company and obviously good for your family. That's great.
Yeah.
Dennis, can you talk a little bit more about adding management to your board? I assume that you mean internal, executive management, management from the company, employees, people on the W-2 or whatever line for you guys as a company. How did you start to bring that in? And, maybe for companies that haven't done that before, can you talk a little bit about maybe guidance or suggestions on how they could move that direction a little bit by starting to integrate the board with the company a bit more?
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, because it's not always typical and maybe not always advisable, but in our case, we felt we wanted real diversity and we wanted our independent directors to really understand the company. And what better way but to have multiple ways of exposure to our management team, because succession planning, look, I think there's two main functions of a board. It's strategic planning and succession planning. And private companies, public companies are better at that. Private companies, it's like, do I really want to talk to my lawyer about estate planning now? I'll put it off. Well, succession planning is somewhat the same thing. So we wanted our board members to really understand not only family succession planning, but management succession. And so it worked for us by having some of the top people in management and our CFO, our HR director, some of our business. It varied over the years depending on what we thought was important, but some of our business unit presidents of our business units, et cetera. And we talked earlier about terms. We rotated people on and off, and you have to be careful because it's considered a perk for some of the top managers to be on the board, but and we also we had executive sessions where management was uh,
Oh, good.
not present, so we could talk without them. And it was understood that yes, they're on the board and they have a vote on the board, but we are going to have executive sessions without management. Well, it was in two parts. The first part of the executive session was with the CEO present to get his or her guidance, if you will. And then
Hmm.
a second part of the executive session without the CEO present and just the independent directors.
I think that latter practice is important for every board to have an executive session literally at every meeting without the CEO. And of course, the reason you do it every meeting is so that if you call one and you haven't done one for 2 years, it doesn't look like there's something wrong. It's a good practice to do that. So I'm glad you brought that up, Dennis. I think it's a very important practice.
So, skill gap mapping. Um, you know, I think it's important to start with the business's future needs and not just what is in today's comfort zone. So, all of these items are pretty important gaps to be filling. I know Dennis had talked about human resources personally to me, how that is a huge gap that a lot of companies kind of forget about or maybe put on the back burner when it comes to that skill set. Um, I know, talk a little bit more about that aspect of it, the human resources,
Yeah,
Dennis.
when I talk to family businesses, private companies, I ask them, what's your biggest problem? And today, and it's different all the time, but today it's recruiting and retaining workers. And it's going to be that I believe, for the next 10 or 15 years because of the baby boomers retiring, and there's just not enough bodies, much less trained bodies, coming up to succeed them. So we're going to be in a trade war for good people with our neighbors down the street. And so right now, I think there's a great need to have the human resource director on the board. Um, I mentioned before that we were ranked as the fourth best company to work for in America. That was a huge benefit to the bottom line because we didn't have to worry about recruiting expenses and turnover and you get it wrong. And it's just a huge, we say it to replace somebody, it's between 1.5 and 2 times a person's salary to replace them over time and get them up to speed. And so if you have low turnover, which we did, um, and you're known in the community as the best place to work, you've got great quality people who are trying to get hired by you, and that's what you want. And then if you're doing mergers and acquisitions, you want your financial person to be on the board or your development person, business development person. So it varies, but the catch is, any of the listeners that want to do a skill matrix, little um, matrix demonstration, I'd be happy to send it to them if they're interested. But the trick is to start by making a matrix on the left-hand column. What do you think are the skills you need around the board table over the next 5 to 10 years? And then rank your current board members. Do they just a simple ABC? Is it one of their strengths or weaknesses? And then the right-hand column is what are we missing? And then go get it.
And we do have a skills matrix in that board boot camp workbook, which might have some skill sets that you haven't really thought about, but you know, being able to prioritize what's more important right now. Yeah, I think that is helpful too. So are there any surprising skill gaps that some family companies are looking for to either of you?
I, Nothing surprises me. I want to go back to HR, just to reinforce what Dennis was saying. That has come into so many matrices in the last few years. It is increasingly something that is recognized as an important skill to have on the board. Many companies say, people are our most important asset. Well, one way to reflect that is to actually have HR in the boardroom. And it really can matter. So absolutely, it's one of the things. But I would say that when you're doing the matrix, it helps to have an outside help, wherever that comes from. it's hard to do it yourself, especially if you've never done it before, because it's hard to be objective with a group of people that if you're the board chair and you've been chairing the board for a few years to really do that. But um, to kind of go back to what I said earlier, it's important to do it and to have it and to be thinking about it as a regular exercise. Not that you're going to replace people all the time, but having that conversation really does help in thinking about succession. Because if you're not thinking about it all the time, it's not as easy to to assure that your board is always current with the needs of the company. So you do it every year. You're looking for who's going to replace the people that are going to leave, and it's a great conversation to have. And part of the reason it's helpful, to get back to Dan said, if you're talking about this a lot, then the offboarding can become a little bit more part of the process rather than, oh my God, they're throwing me off the board. It's not, shouldn't be viewed that way. It should ideally should be viewed as you had 10 years or 9 years or some number of years helping this company. It's fantastic. We'd like to just change it up a little bit. This, it shouldn't be felt that way. So culturally, when board leadership can make the offboarding a part of the process, it is really helpful.
Honestly, Joe, it's maybe a little bit of a red flag when they don't, you know? I mean, you might
Yep.
not have the right butts in the seats if folks aren't willing to view this opportunity role on the board as a, temporary thing, or at least something that's going to require them to re-up. It's not a set it and forget it type of thing. And so um, I think that there can be some red flags in your conversations with potential board members when you bring up topics like, well, this is a 3-year term or this is a 2-year term. And if you get, awkward pushback or things like that from them, I think, you've kind of found your answer that maybe that's not the kind of person you're looking for, just because I think at all costs you want to avoid having those messy breakups on the back end, right? And you want to use governance and policy and procedure to move things along more smoothly. Anyway, just
I couldn't agree more. Having the conversation, starting that conversation at recruitment is absolutely the best way to do it. You're absolutely right. You started at the beginning. It's part of you're coming to board meetings. We do this, we do that. And by the way, our routine is, we're reviewing everyone every year. We're always looking to, make the board the best board. It should be part of the culture so that, to your point, if someone's pushing back on that, that is a red flag. You don't really want someone that thinks this is a lifetime appointment.
and
Kristen,
maybe
you
go
asked about surprises, and I'm always surprised that when I do a skill gap, 100% of the time, the first thing that they say they need is somebody with their industry knowledge. And I always, in a nice way, say, "Oh, that's because you don't know your industry. Your people aren't up to date with what your business is all about." And
Hey.
and in a teasing way, I try to convince them that there's lots of ways for you to know about your industry associations and so forth. Um, but there's other board seats that are valuable, and I wouldn't waste it with somebody with industry. That's your management's job to stay abreast and tell the board what's going on in the industry. But it's always a surprise that that's the first thing they talk about.
Yeah, I mean, initially it seems to make sense. I mean, you want to stay current and you know, doing what the other industries are, keeping up with them. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, you talk about other, I often say, well, wouldn't you like to have somebody from Amazon on your board, a senior executive who turned an industry upside, retail in Main Street, USA, upside down. Uh, what would Amazon have to do with you? Well, they don't just sell books anymore online, which is where they started. So you need an innovative thinker that can bring good questions to your board.
I would say though that board members are not one-trick ponies, right? You're not looking for one thing. So maybe you want an industry expert who helped their company grow dramatically. So you're really looking for guidance on growth, but if you happen to find one or can find one in your own industry,
Of course,
that's good. So, these are all the six that are listed are all, of course, important, but it doesn't mean these are the six. One person could be three of these. So that's part of again, going back to the importance of the recruiting process and knowing what you're knowing all of the skills and experience you'd like and attributes you'd like to include on your board, because you can get obviously more than one thing. Um, but I think you're right. If it's just, oh, let's get experience, that isn't enough, actually. It would have to be more than that. They did something with their company. They did something in your industry that was really different and maybe offers a different perspective that is valuable in the boardroom. So, you know, it is part of the recruiting process.
yeah, and that's Joe just brought up a really important point. The Private Directors Association, we run training courses for board members, and that's one of the things I do when I do one-on-one coaching with them is, yeah, you've got this great experience in this skill. That's fabulous. But boards are looking for more than that. You have to rewrite your resume to talk about what other things are you going to bring to the board besides being an expert in AI. They want more than that. Uh, so Joe's bringing up a great point.
Thanks. Hmm.
So, yeah, prioritizing what you need. I think it was Joe that touched on it's hard to even figure out objectively what you're missing, what you need, but you can't fill every gap at once. So prioritizing your needs, finding 2 to 3 uh, capabilities for the next 5 to 10 years might be the way to go. And um, I think Dennis said, yeah, strategic planning and succession planning are two pretty common core board functions that people are looking for. Um,
But
what's go
it's not
ahead.
necessarily two board members, though. So, I mean, you could have someone who's a great strategic planner and also has been on a board where they were doing succession planning, as an example. So, when you see, say, 2 to 3 capabilities, I think that's too small. I think you can do more than that. Like I said, board members are not one, with some exceptions, are not usually one-trick ponies. I mean, if you've got, depending on who it is, I mean, it could be someone you bring on for one skill at which this person is just remarkable. And it isn't bringing maybe that much else, although that I'm trying to think of an example where that would be true. But if you recruit, you won't fill everything. But I think um, thinking that you're just thinking about 2 or 3 things over the next 5 to 10 years, I think you can do more than that. And if you're doing it, you have a regular cadence, doing it every year or whatever it might be. You're always thinking about it, and as new boards members come on, they're adding they're giving their input about how to strengthen the board. So it is an ongoing thing. I don't think you get stuck anywhere. And of course, as you go along, something can change in your industry or change in the world where, I mean, you mentioned HR. HR wasn't a critical skill or experience that boards were looking for, I don't know, 5, 7 years ago. Suddenly, not suddenly, but it definitely is now. Dennis is right about, I mean, absolutely right about that. And that does, AI is another one. Well, of course, you got to be able to understand it. I mean, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have had that conversation. So it's always changing. It really is. It's not, let's see what we get for 5 years. Every year you have to look what's going on in our industry, what are our competitors doing, what are they doing, and the same kind of analysis you do for your business is somewhat applicable to the board. Does that make sense to you, Dennis?
Yeah, the title of this slide is prioritizing what you need now and for the next 5 to 10 years. You need both. You need people on the board that
Yep.
will deal with whatever the issue is, the issue of the day, if you will, meaning the next 12 months planning period. But beyond that, um, it's hard. It's hard work to really do proper strategic planning. And by strategic planning, I think we don't mean 5 top priorities. No, I call those 5 priorities the wish list. We wish we could do whatever it is, but planning is okay. Now, what are besides the, whatever you call them, goals or initiatives or whatever language you use, step down 3 or 4 steps, which is, okay, how are we going to do it? What are
Mm.
the 5 things we have to do to accomplish that goal, that top strategic initiative? And who's going to do it? And how are we going to measure? That's key. How are we going to measure success? So strategic planning is really difficult. And we touched earlier on succession planning. It's succession planning for the family as well as for the business. Um, and and that can be a lot of fun as you develop the next generation. It can also be difficult if the next generation one doesn't care about the business. Oh my gosh, now what are we going to do? Or they don't have the skills to really do it. And right now, the succession planning for private companies, there's an age gap between what it used to be, where our generation would have kids in our 20s, and by the time we were 60, Junior was 40 years old and been in the business for 20 years and can't wait for Dad to get out of here, or Mom. But today there's an extra 10 years. People are having kids in their 30s. And there's a 10-year gap, and Junior isn't ready when Dad is ready to not totally let go, but back off a little bit. And so that's created a whole new thing for family businesses, which is called the interim CEO, whose job is to run the business for the next, let's say, 10 years, and also develop the next generation so that they're ready to go. And the interim CEO understands that they're only there for a fixed, maybe 5 years, maybe 7, whatever. And their job is to make sure the company is in good hands with the next generation when they leave. It's a whole new sea change, just because of birth rate at a different time.
Mm.
And I wanted to ask if there was a way you could help families distinguish between skill sets that they like and skills they actually need on their board. You know, they might see AI because AI is everywhere, but how do you bring them back to the skills they actually need to be on their board?
Well, that's the role of the family business consultant. I don't want to pat Joe and me on the back, and we're not here to sell. But it's a great question you're asking. It takes an independent person to really help the family, like the example I gave before. Yeah, you want somebody in your industry, but don't you want more than that? Aren't there other issues? Aren't there ways, so the question is a good one. You, as an independent consultant, or the lead director. We haven't talked about lead directors, but the role of the lead director to really push the board to look at the future of the company, as you say, for the next 5 or 10 years, and really think about what's coming down the road, and how do we get ahead of it by having people on the board that has at least that skill plus others.
It is hard work. I think doing it regularly helps get better at it. I agree. You got to have non-family in the process because otherwise, it's for the same reason you want independent members in the board directors in the first place. You want outside perspectives because it's hard if only family members are thinking what strategically we need. It's kind of it's a circle, you know. That's why you want the independent members to begin with. But if you get into a regular cadence and you start to do it, you get better at it. That's for sure. It's like strategic planning. If you do your first one, you're going to get better with the second one. So it is a learned skill. You have to work at it. It's part of it's it, it it's part of it's a critical part of making your company as competitive as it can be.
Great. Okay. Our slide on cultural fit. I know we're kind of talking about this here and there, but yeah, I mean, you need to bring someone on that you're comfortable with, that feels right. I mean, it's not just competence alone. And do you have more to add about the cultural fit of your
I, you
kind
know,
of
I go back to the sports analogy. I mean, everyone, some sports fan, whether it's soccer, whether it's football, whether you don't draft just for skills. You draft who's going to add to the team, who's going to be a team leader, who's going to think that winning is more important than, maybe individual accolade. I mean, all of those things are attributes. They're part of the mindset. So it's really equally important in a board. These things could be. Calm is important, although it's good to have someone with energy too. So, but it's how do you put a team together that collectively will cover the ground? And that is, I think it's an easy way to look at what board composition might look like. It's not just skills. It's not just how many boards you've been on. It is also, will this person fit on the team? If we go to a board, if we have a board dinner or a board retreat and we're spending the day together doing planning, is this going to get old after a half hour? Is this someone I can really sit with for, 6 hours, 7 hours? So it is all of that. It's really critical.
But during that interview process, how do you kind of weed out the ones that don't fit so well? I mean, is it just spending time with them? Are there some key questions you can ask them? What's the best way to find out?
Have Don't rush the process. Have a long, deliberative process. When I've had family companies that come to build their first board, and finally they get there and they really want the board now. So now it's like we haven't had one ever, but we'd like one in, X months. And my advice is do it right, don't do it fast. You really don't want to rush the process. So take time with the candidates. It's going to be different for everyone. You have some number of meetings, and of course, in person. You get referrals. You talk to people about their backgrounds. It's like any other kind of recruiting. You wouldn't hire a CEO without digging really deep before you find someone that's going to run your company. And it shouldn't be, I mean, it's not the same thing, but it's a similar mindset in terms of what the process is. So there's no one question. It's having conversations and having more than one, and maybe sometimes bring other people into the room for them, depending on who it is and what you're looking for.
So I agree with what Joe said. I'll give you an example of where I messed up.
Mm.
Um, I was the lead director and I was chair of the search committee and chair of the governance committee for a public company that was really run like a private company. It shouldn't have been public, but it was private. It was should have been private, but anyway, I ran a search and I hired as a new board member, recommended to the board, and they hired him. A consultant with the Boston Consulting Group. If people aren't familiar with that, that's one of the leading management consulting group. I was so proud of myself. This is going to be fabulous. And we got to the first board meeting and we're halfway through and he hasn't said a word, and that's good. He's listening, he's getting the lay of the land. I like that. Good, good, good. We get about three-quarters of the way through and we're on some topic, and all of a sudden he sits up taller in his chair and his voice changed and he began to tell us how the Boston Consulting Group would handle that issue. Basically, he was talking down to us.
Mm,
Frankly, he had a good
wow.
idea, but everybody in the boardroom kind of their eyes glazed over. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But it's look, he's nervous. It's his first meeting. Oh, okay. No, I was wrong. That was and every board meeting after that, he would do, and I'd coach him between meetings. You know, I would be his interpreter. When he was done lecturing us, I'd say, look, what Bill's saying, would something like that possibly work for us? I don't know. What do you guys think? What would be the advantage? You know, I would be the interpreter. In the end, he never did learn. And after I think it was about a year and a half, I just kicked him off the board because what the culture fit. He had good ideas. We needed to hear what he was saying, but we weren't hearing it, and it wasn't registering, and we weren't doing it. So what Joe talked about, take your time. That's the mistake I made. I didn't expose him more to more people in the interview process.
Mhm.
I just jumped at it because after all, he's BCG.
I know. Well, but good for you that you responded by offboarding him within a couple of years. I mean, that mistakes are going to get made. I mean, there's no perfect process, right? You have to be ready to act if it doesn't work. So I would say that may be the most important lesson. No matter how much you do, you may get someone who just, I mean, their background is so amazing, so impressive, but the reality in the boardroom isn't the same. And sometimes you don't know that. I mean, sometimes no matter how good the process is, you don't know that till it starts to happen. So good for someone that would actually see it, try to fix it, which you did, coach them, which you did. And then if none of that works, that's part of the job of the chair.
Yeah, coaching is interesting because many of you maybe know the expression that our us board geeks use, which is nose in, fingers out. And what does that mean? It means your job as a board member is to be nosy, nose in, ask lots of really good questions. Fingers out means you don't run this business anymore. Maybe you never did, but you don't run the business. That's management's job. So fingers out. Don't get down too far into the weeds. Stay at a high level. I use a slightly different expression. I use nose in, fingers out, sensors on.
Hmm,
As a director, you need to be sensitive to how far and fast you should push things, and how you can fit into the culture and be patient. That's one of the points on this slide. You might have the best idea, but the business isn't ready, the management isn't ready, the owners aren't ready, but they will be if it's a good idea. So just maybe you bring it up at the next board meeting, and maybe the next board meeting after that. You have to be patient, but if it's a good idea, sooner or later, everybody's gonna, if you present it in a sensitive way, meaning continuous improvement. I've seen this work at other companies. Uh, can it work here? Um, and that sensitivity to the culture is really important.
for sure.
Okay. Where to find these independent directors? Well, of course, you need to call the UNI Family Business Center and we can match you up right away. But other peer networks, perhaps not your industry associations, unless you're getting recommendations, but retired executives, um, NA, NACD, PDA, you don't have to limit yourself to, your immediate local circles, but you can look nationwide, and there are strong candidates everywhere. Um, do you have any input on that path, finding these amazing people to serve on your board?
One other thing would be board. There are a lot of board groups, and I'll give you an example in a second that have members who, and the group works on making the members better. So there are people who are board members. I'll just use one example. Extraordinary Women on Boards. I don't know if you know who they are, but one of the founders, Lisa Shallett, was on my podcast maybe 5 years ago, and they have their you're allowed in the group if you've been on a board, a for-profit board. They spend their time really making their their members better board members. And so, and they're all over the country. I'm not saying Extraordinary Women on Boards is the only one. It's just one that I'm familiar with, and the work they do. And if you're looking, so when I recruit, I will send them the board spec, and they will come back to you with, here are 10 members that fill the needs. And it is a great way to recruit because a group like that is really taking the kind of stuff we're talking about in terms of the skills, experience, and attributes. They're taking it really seriously. And the ones that really spend time, educating and working with their members to be better board members, obviously that gives you a leg up because they're not just people with skills. They are very skilled, but they're people who have decided that being a board member is actually a job that I need to work on. The fact that I was a great CFO doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be a great board member. And you have to work on that like every other job. So that's another one I'd add. They're all over the country. There's every region has them. Some are for women, some are for both, all sorts of groups. But it is, I think, looking for groups that really work on the educational component of being on a board member for their folks is one thing to think about.
Yeah, I'm a member of the last one. I'm a member of both the National Association of Corporate Directors and the Private Directors Associations.
As am
And
I. As am
and
I.
and,
Yeah.
and both
Both are good.
organizations do what Joe just talked about. The Private Directors Association has partnered with NUI, and thank you. We offer a no charge service. Just send us your board listing description. If you need help putting that listing together, we'll help you do that. And then we act like a conduit. We send that board listing out to our 3,500 members across the country, most of whom have taken the certificate course in
Mm.
private company governance. Um, and you'll get 100, 150 applications from really excellent people, myself and others who have been had board experience or maybe looking for their first board experience, but they've got the skilled talent that you're looking for. So that's a no charge service that we do. The advantage is you get 150 applicants. The disadvantage is that you get 150 applicants. So we are not an executive search firm. So we don't rank the people or evaluate them.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
up to you to do. But if you can't find what you're looking for out of those 150 people, okay, well then go hire a executive search firm to find your board member. But all of the things you listed, all of the bullet points on this slide are ways you should explore.
And then once you have your 150 applicants, weeding through them, just starting that conversation and how to approach those candidates. I think, you know, definitely honesty and clarity is only going to help you out, and sharing your story, your challenges, and your why you're actually building your board. Um, have you noticed any or mistakes that families make in those first conversations?
It's helpful to have someone that is experienced in doing it. So as an example, if you have a board member that is an experienced board member, that would be helpful. Or you bring out someone from the outside. I think the first time you do it, it's good to have someone that's been through it in some way, because I think it's hard to figure it out and get it right from the get-go. But it's more than one conversation. You're not going to know in one conversation. Um, a lot of times we'll do a couple of Zoom calls and then an in-person, so that by the time we get to the in-person, we've you've had a series of conversations. It's hard to know it from one conversation. Um, and as we talked about earlier, sometimes there are different people on the second conversation, or someone's for the in-person, you bring someone else in so that you get, again, like a diversity of people listening to the board candidate and responding to the board candidate. I do think that at the end, the people that are going to make the decision should have been on every meeting so they see everything. But it's great to have other voices in the room sometime. I just think it's not a one conversation. Not that you're implying that, but I wouldn't want anyone to think, oh, we'll have a conversation. No, that's the start of the process, a series of conversations and other things. You invite them to dinner. I mean, it's a whole series of things you can do before you bring someone into this very important role, especially in a family business.
Yeah, and when we talk about the interview process, starting the conversation, whether it's for board or other the tendency is for the person doing the interviewing is to give them all the answers. So be careful. Ask them the questions first. So I don't know that it depends where you're at in the interview process, but don't tell them all the things you like here. Start with why are you doing a board? What are you looking for? What are your biggest challenges? If you start with telling them all that, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's the next slide here that Kristen has put up. If you start with giving them all the answers, then it's easy for them. So, oh, yeah, me too. Uh, I'd rather start in a different place. I have some of my favorite questions. Um, why do you think you're a good fit for this board? Hopefully, in this day of AI, even though we're private companies and we keep a lot of all our information confidential, it's out there. So if the person is interviewing for the position, they've already, hopefully, if they're qualified board members, they've already hopefully done their homework, and they can find out a lot about you just by asking the right AI questions. And so one of my questions is, why do you think you're a good fit for the board? It's a way of finding out, have they done their homework? Are they really interested? The second one is, are you prepared for the time commitment? They've got all these other things they're involved in. Are they prepared? And if they say, well, I'm not sure, I don't know at the time. Okay, good. Well, that's the time for you to explain um, that it's a quarterly board meeting, et cetera, et cetera. Another question, do you understand the culture of this organization? Well, that alerts them right away that culture is really important.
Mm.
In the interview process, you're asking me all about that. Do they, and hopefully They might not know the culture of your company yet, but they can talk about, well, I don't really know your culture, but I think culture is really important. And on the other boards I've served on, et cetera, and they can, in the interview process, explain to you that their position on culture. And the other is, are you up to date with changes going on in industry today? Um, what kinds of new innovations do you think you could bring to our company? So those are just a couple of, in addition to the questions that Kristen has put up on the slide here. Um, so I hesitate to tell them too many answers, to tell them too much about what my expectations are. Instead, put the shoe on the other foot. And and so that's my take on how to get started.
Couple of quick comments. The is the candidate prepared for the interview really important? And it can, and you'll know within 10 minutes. It's if they didn't spend the time, it's the fact that it's a public company. I mean, there's so much information out there. There's no reason for them not to know. So that is very important. The other thing is let them ask a lot of questions too, because I think that also shows, have they given enough thought to this job, or do they just want to get on a board? So the type of question they will ask will tell you even more about how much they've thought about this and how they've prepared. So if we have an hour with a candidate, we always make sure there's plenty of time for them to ask questions. It's almost as, and sometimes even more important in learning who they are when they get a chance to lead the conversation. What are they going to ask you about? Um, so I think that's important.
Yeah, you're
So
just really
talk
asking
about,
those questions. Oh, go ahead.
but I want to put a footnote on what Joe said. You want them to ask you questions, and you need to be prepared. Not only should they be prepared, but you better be prepared. So I've got my list of 5 questions that they're liable to ask me that I better be prepared for. Number one, what's the company long-term strategy? You better have a good answer. Or to say, that's why we need you. We don't have a good, be
I wouldn't
prepared.
say that.
No. Well, I don't know, Joe. If it's the truth, if it's the truth, yeah, we need you because we know we should have we kind of have it's all up here. We got a strategy, but we need to formalize it. That's why we need you. So, be open and honest. Number two, what is the long-term strategy of the shareholders? In other words, now what's the company strategy and if it's private company, what's the strategy for the family? Can you describe the board? Tell more about the board, the history, the type of people on the board. Uh, Back then, number four, the background of the board members, the existing board, who they're going to be working with, what's their background, and then some information about, they're liable to ask about the management team. So be prepared to tell them what you want to disclose. Some information's confidential. So I wouldn't tell them about the fact that you're about to fire the CFO, because you might not hire them and that word gets out. And so you got to
Oh,
be
yeah.
careful. But some information about we've got a really strong team and talk about it, et cetera. Anyway, the point is be prepared for the questions they might ask you. And it also tells you something about them to see, as Joe said, what kind of questions do they have for you? If they, no, I don't have any questions. Oh, okay. That tells you something too.
Well, yeah, well, if they don't have any questions, then that would be really surprising. But sometimes they're just more thoughtful. They've
Yeah.
actually thought about what the questions are, or if they've read enough about your company, they may actually have a really, you know, a question that really makes you think about your company. And that's, of course, what you're looking for in a board member. So that's helpful.
So then spinning it the other way, just because you're interviewing them doesn't mean they want to serve on your board, or they see red flags. There's things that can turn a good candidate away from serving on your board. Um, you when expectations might be unclear, or there's hidden conflict, or the owners are overly controlling and aren't willing to listen. You know,
Well, no
what
one would want to join that board. If you come to the conclusion that they're overly controlling, that's a
yeah.
tough recruit. You better put on a better face than that. Um,
Yeah.
the thing with family boards that I find is the number one concern is, are they going to really listen to the board? I mean, is this a board is my voice going to be heard? That's the question that I would say no matter what the context is, even to public, private, it doesn't matter. You don't want to be in a really good board members don't want to serve on a board where, for whatever reason, the board is not really listened to, whether it's an overbearing, whether the owners, it's a family, whether the CEO or the chair or whatever it is. But when in a family context, the concern often is, are they really going to listen, or are they just putting this board together because they think they should have a board? So that is important. And that is something, of course, you should be talking about before the interview to make sure that when they're listening, they're hearing that, you're really taking this board seriously and this board recruitment seriously. The other thing up here, I'm just going to say, no compensation. If there's no compensation, you don't need to start interviewing because this is not nonprofit. I don't know. I'm not sure what private family company thinks they're going to get someone for free, except for a family member, possibly. An unclear compensation. Well, I mean, you should have thought about that before you're interviewing. So I'm just saying that shouldn't even come out. I think the thing you got to think about is, how do we convey that this is a board you want to be on? That we're going to listen. We run our board. We take it seriously. We do strategic planning, whatever it is about the board, because yeah, you're looking at them, they're looking at you too. And the best board members have options, right? I mean, this isn't the only board they can join. So you said this before, Dennis, that whoever the search group is has to be very prepared to really make the board member feel this is a serious board. We've thought about you. So you wouldn't want someone that hadn't read anything about the company. Don't want someone that hasn't even bothered to read your resume, as an example. You should have questions about their background, so that they don't feel like you're taking them for granted.
Yeah,
And it's
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
So let's take them one at a time. This is really an important slide. Lack of clarity about expectations. You should have a written charter, policy guidelines, process, whatever you want to call it. This is the way the board operates, and it's clear expectations of what you expect from the board member and what the board members should expect from the company. And just here's how we operate, um, and what we're after, and family conflict hidden or minimized. Um, you should be prepared to say that, look, we're a private company, let's say family board. By the way, when I use the term private company, I mean family businesses as well as private equity, as well as ESOPs, as well as startups. So I lump those four things into what I call private companies.
So
Um,
non-public, is that what you're saying?
yeah, non-public. Thank you. Yeah, that's a better way to say it. So there's no room at the board meeting for family conflict. And you want to explain to the director that you're interviewing, or as it comes up, it's liable to come up from time to time. And the chairman or the lead director, or anybody should say, that's a great issue you guys are talking about, but why don't you take it up at the family council? Let's focus back on the the issue of running the business.
Mm.
And we always recommend family councils where those items that invariably they'll come into the board discussion somehow, and it's the board members' job to divert them to outside the board meeting in one way or another. And we're going to talk about compensation in the next slide, but overly controlling owners, that that happens because it's their business, it's their family, it's their estate, and they've probably grown up in the business. They probably know that business better than anybody in the room. So,
But Dennis, it's overly controlling.
right.
Every family business is going to have obviously a really passionate interest in their company, but are you willing to listen to outsiders?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I mean,
And,
that's really if you're a good board member, not just someone that's dying to get on a board, but someone that is being recruited. Yeah, you want your voice heard. So overly controlling, at least to me, says, "Hmm, thanks. We're going to do what we want to do." I think candidates have to be convinced that you're going to listen. I mean, that seems fundamental. Overly controlling. Yeah. Everyone's controlling. It's your business. I agree. But are you willing to listen?
yeah, when I've worked with family business starting their first, what I call real board with independent directors, and I explain the difference, well, you got to choose, is it going to be a fiduciary board or an advisory board? And they say, well, what's the difference? And I tell them, well, fiduciary board means that when you take a vote at the board meeting, you got to do it. It's a legal thing, so to speak. Okay. If it's an advisory board, you don't have to do what the vote is, but you better. Because if you don't, those good board members, time and time again, they're giving advice and you're not listening to them. If they're smart, they're going to say, this board isn't for me, and you're going to lose them. So it's the point that Joe raised earlier. You need to ensure the candidate that we really are going to listen. We really want
Yep.
your advice. We're going to pay attention. And if it makes sense for us, we're going to do it.
Yeah. And we do have a question in the chat. Similar to hiring and retaining staff, are you finding that it is difficult to find and retain independent board members?
No.
No,
I think it's the most popular
Okay.
job for people over 50. Everyone wants to be on a board. I mean, the pool is huge. I think the challenge is obviously finding the right people for your board. So there are plenty of candidates. It's a matter of where you're going to look for what pools are you fishing in, so to speak. That's why some of the groups that are board groups and do training are really good because those people have taken it seriously. They've gone to the NACD or the PDA thing, or they've done things with whatever group it is, EWAB or some other group. So, but there are plenty of people out there. It makes it more challenging, but you know that you can find them, but it's a lot of people want to get on boards. And if
Let's have those options.
yeah, okay. Compensating.
Okay, compensation. Um, yeah, I mean, I think this topic is a little tricky for a lot of companies just starting out their board. Where do you start? How do you even figure out this number? What's the best way to go about it? I mean, there's the retainers, meeting fees, committee and chair premiums, other expenses, travel, insurance, that kind of thing. But how do you know if you can attract top talent with what compensation you're offering?
You find out what everyone else is giving. I mean, you need to know what the comp looks like in your area for your size company, obviously. I mean, no, I mean the expenses and protection is easy. if they have to travel, you're paying for that. So you have to think about that. You shouldn't hire someone from California if you're in Boston if you're not going to compensate for travel. And obviously D&O, I mean, if they don't even ask about D&O, then you got to wonder why. So that goes for granted. But everything else, I mean, there are a lot of there's a lot of data out there about public and private companies in terms of board. So, it's not that hard to find. Um, so you want to be in the mix. This is a paid advertisement advertisement for Private Directors Association. But yeah.
No, no, this isn't Private Director
Oh,
Association.
director. Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't
Yeah,
read it.
this is a magazine.
Yeah,
It's
I
published
get it.
by MLR.
Yeah.
Um, Private Directors isn't involved.
Okay.
But annually they do, I think, the best private company director compensation. It usually comes out in the October issue, so it should be coming out soon. Last year, they do it every year, and it's a thorough analysis of all the things you have on the slide here in terms of the best practices. So I would encourage, and by the way, the other issues, not just the compensation issue, is excellent. It's called the Private Company Director Magazine for Private Company Governance. And I would encourage everybody to get a subscription. And nothing in it for me or PDA. And as
Right.
Joe said, there's lots of other surveys. That's the one I like the best. Uh, because it's really focused on private companies and every aspect of it in terms of the annual retainer and meeting fees and chair 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 of a committee fees and all that and including, by the way, lately more long-term incentive, phantom stock kind of things for private directors.
Mhm.
That seems to be a trend more over the years that I've watched. More companies are in addition to the regular fees that are up on the screen, they're also adding some sort of long-term incentive compensation packages.
Do you see that in family businesses though?
Yeah.
I do you really? I have not
Yeah.
seen that.
Again, phantom stock, not
No, no, I know. Yeah.
um,
Interesting.
yeah. Uh, think about it for a minute. What do we want the board members to feel like they're like a shareholder? They're like they're in it for the
Mm,
long-term gain of the business. So why shouldn't they get a little piece of the pie if they doing their job?
mm.
Like performance carrot stick. It's always
Oh, I think I understand that it's a great idea. I just don't see a lot of families doing it. But maybe you see more of that. I think
well,
there's
the
a real
last year's report in the magazine talked about it, and I'm sure this year it'll probably be more prevalent. I would expect.
yeah. It is a good source. I do get that. I when I saw it, I misread it because I thought you were.
Right. No,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, no, they are good. Often there are people in the area that can help. I mean, it depends
Mhm.
on who you know. So that, because
Right.
sometimes it can be as it can be very localized in a way. And
Mhm.
that's it's helpful to if you know other families that have boards, that's the obvious thing. What are you paying? You can ask around. It's not scientific, but it will give you some sense of what your peers are doing in your area. So that, I mean, if you're recruiting from New England, for example, well, what are people in this area getting? It could be a lot different than what they're getting someplace else. So, but it's available. I think that's the key thing. You can find that information. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to guess. Um, you have to be willing to pay it though. That is the thing that I find sometimes the first time out, especially people wow, is it really worth that? And my reaction is, if it's not, then you didn't recruit the right people because a board is worth it. There's no question about that. It's not that it's not if they're not worth what the going rate is, then you really just need to look for different people.
Okay. Term limits. So we kind of talked
Mhm.
about that too. If your term limits are too short, you're not, I don't think you're building the trust that you need to have with that member. And then if it's too long, yeah, they get too comfortable, too cozy. Um, they're not as objective as they used to be. You can use evaluations, staggered rotations, advisory roles, skills-based succession. Um, what's the ideal term structure you've seen work well in family companies?
Hmm.
Well,
But you go first.
all right. We're both a little hesitant here. But I believe in 1 year terms.
Yep.
1 year terms? What? That sounds crazy. But I also believe in annual evaluation of the board in three parts. Uh, the board as a whole, individual directors, and evaluation of the committees. And think about it. If you have a 3 year term, um, and you find like I did, I hired the wrong guy, it happens, and I'm stuck with him for 3 years. Oh my God, please. I gotta have a way to get rid of him. And so Joe talked well about the executive session of the board to have it every year, so it's not a big deal. Well, it's the same with board evaluation. Have it every year, and the focus is not to get rid of bad board members. The focus is continuous improvement. How can we make this board better? And we're all in it. Don't we all want that? And so I favor 1 year terms. And that's a check-in with each director saying, oh, I hope you're interested in continuing. You've done a great job. It's kind of just a check the box. Or, you know, as as I have experienced as a board member, when it was time for me to go off, and I know that, and I volunteered to listen, I'm not going to run for next year. Or sometimes when I haven't perceived it the way the rest of the board did, I get a little nice retirement party. It's time for you to go, Dennis. And I understand. So I don't know how Joe feels, but I feel 1 year terms.
Yeah, this is one area we disagree. I think, first of all, you can fire someone at any time. There's no contract here. Every board member is essentially an at-will employee. So you don't have to have 1 year terms to get them off in 1 year. It's really the mindset to start with. So I do think 3 year terms, which is the norm, is the right way to go. But I think Dan had raised earlier the idea of term limits. So term limits is one way to control it. As I said before, a lot of people would call that rough justice because you're going to get rid of people you want along with people you may not want. So an ideal situation would be you actually are do everything else you said. I agree with Dennis. Clearly, board should be regularly reviewed. There should be, you can do self-evaluations. Some companies will bring in outsiders to evaluate depending on the size of the board and all that. But it starts with with recruitment. The board is a living organism. It's going to change as the company changes. Our company's changing all the time. And as the company changes, the needs of the company change, and that changes the board. This is something you talk about in board meetings so that no one feels if you off-board them that, oh, I did something wrong or I failed in some way. Now, sometimes it is because you want a good board member, but that's only one of many reasons. It should be ideally part of the culture, which is we do have some board members that have been around for a while, but typically we're rotating. So if they understand that to begin with, then the process of, and you have a process of evaluation, then the process of offboarding, it might not be easy, but it won't be the very difficult task that most people view it as. Most people don't want to do it. But if you embed this process in the culture, it can make it better. But to your point earlier, um, term limits are better than nothing because it is really hard to get a very difficult board member off. People, not legally, you can always fire them. People hesitate, and I've just seen some great owners and really good board chairs who and some of the toughest CEOs, they don't want to do it. So you really need to address that right at the beginning. You cannot you cannot go in this and say, we'll figure it out as we go. That is a mistake. You agree, Dennis? Yeah. Daniel?
Absolutely. Yeah. You and I just disagree on whether it should be one
Yeah,
year or 3 years.
yeah,
But
we
and by
just
the way, Joe is right. Typically, it's 3 years. That's the way most companies do. I
yeah.
just like a report card all the time.
Well, you
And
can give a report card without having a term limit.
of course.
So I just think if you have a 1 year term, candidates are going to think 1 year. I mean, I'm really good at this. Why should I be at jeopardy every year? Even though technically, you can be fired anytime. I just think it may communicate short-term thinking, which I know is not what you mean by it.
Good
Oh,
point. Good point. Yeah.
So what's your ideal length of time they serve on the board in total years? Is it 9 then? Is it 12?
I think every company has to decide. I don't think I really don't think one size fits all.
Okay.
I think 3 year terms, obviously staggered so that people aren't coming up at the same time. Um, but it depends. Some people, 3 years is plenty. And some people you want to keep around longer. I mean, there are people you really don't ever want to let go, and that's hard. Um, and I would just say if you find board members like that, you're really lucky. If the hard part is that you have people you don't want to let go, then that's successful. But even then, some turnover is important. I don't know if I would say 9 years is the thing, although nine is a good number if you're going to have term limits, if that's the way you go. I don't know, Dennis, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. If you feel like you have to have some term, 9 years, three-year terms is probably the right way to go.
Hmm.
I'm performance oriented. If 9 years comes up and oh my God, this guy's staying on top of
Yeah,
it,
I
they're
agree.
really wow, I don't want to because we have this rule, I gotta lose him. Wait, how do I yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's why
just
I say it's rough justice because the bad board member and the exceptional board member are treated exactly the same. Better than nothing, but probably in my view, the least good option for controlling the time on the board. I mean, you got to get the right chair or the right CEO, whatever, who is willing to take the offboarding part of it seriously enough and the refreshment part seriously enough so that like I said, there's no stigma about leaving the board. It's not like,
yeah. Yeah, I have a three-step board evaluation process that I'd be happy to share with the listeners if they're interested. I'd be happy to send it to them. And it basically is questions to evaluate the board as a whole,
mm,
questions to evaluate independent directors. Are they doing what you want them to do? And questions about the committee functioning. Are they getting the support from management? Are they doing their job? They're simple questions. And I recommend that you do a self-evaluation. As Joe said, many companies hire an outside person. You can also do it internally as well. So,
yep.
I think we've got some evaluations in our workbook too to help
uh-huh.
along with that as
Mhm.
well. But so we had talked earlier about onboarding and how essential that is, just setting them up for success from the start. If you skip certain components of that, it can lead to underperformance. It's really not fair to them to expect them to, contribute meaningfully if they don't have the context and history, the financials, strategy, just operational items of your company. Do you have specific onboarding procedures that you recommend?
Well, I would say this, onboarding is, if you've gone through this process of recruiting and onboarding isn't part of it, then you're wasting your time. Because, I mean, really, you should want your board director to hit the ground running at the first meeting. That doesn't mean they won't get better, but they shouldn't be sitting in a meeting and not knowing. So a robust onboarding is as important as anything else we've talked about. We've talked about recruiting and taking your time and asking the right questions and the matrix charts. This is part of it. I mean, you have to have a robust onboarding. Great to have other board members involved. Great to hear from senior management, so they're hearing directly. Often great to also have dinner with the full board, so that the new members, if they don't know them, they have that. I mean, many boards have a board dinner the night before their meetings. Good to include the new folks for that, but as long as it's not an hour or 2 hours, but a robust, like a board meeting. It should be a board meeting that is meant to bring them fully up to date with as much information from various sources, so that when they're in the boardroom the first day, the first meeting, they are a full participant. Now, they'll get better, but they shouldn't feel out of place at all.
Yeah, I imagine the board meeting is not the time for them to learn about the company and get to know people for the first time. So,
Yeah,
all
I
right.
would add one bullet point. I think you've got excellent bullet points up there, Kristen, but I'll add one, and that is legal issues.
Mm,
Um, Onboarding, they should know what legal issues have come up over the last 10 years and what maybe is on the docket right now, if there's some current legal issues, because that might scare them off, but they should know it and not find out at the first board meeting that
mm.
but I think you've got an excellent list of bullet points up there.
I
Uh,
agree. I agree.
And then I think Joe is a big promoter of the off ramp. So,
This is your slide, Joe.
Yes. So,
yeah, I mean, yeah, just defining that respectful exit before
yeah,
you need it. I think that's
I
that
think,
says a
yeah.
lot and can make
I,
for
the,
for an easy exit.
The
Yeah.
way you put it here is exactly right. You want, usually people are very excited to be onboarded. You want them to feel good. I mean, it won't happen always, but it should happen most of the time. That they feel really good about the board service they've given, especially in a family context, when it really is personal in a lot of ways. So, um, you should make them feel as good about it as you can. I will just say again, that involves making sure the understanding of what you're expecting is clear from the start, so there's no disappointment about it, because you should be able to celebrate their service when they leave. I think that really well put.
I had an interesting experience. I was hired as a consultant to help a private company do strategic planning. And in the process of that, I kept hearing with the management staff how disappointed they were with the board. And I kept hearing, I said, well, I don't understand. Why are you disappointed with the board? And then they'd tell me all kinds of stuff. And I said, well, why don't you change the board members? And they said, well, we can't. I said, what do you mean you can't? Well, they're shareholders. I said, wait a minute. They're shareholders, but don't you think they care about the success of the company if they're shareholders? Well, sure. Well, you're telling me that they're dragging down the company because they're taking up valuable seats at the board where you could get, and we rattled off all kinds of help they wanted from their board. And why don't we throw them a retirement party and and congratulate them for the wonderful service they've done, but explain that to really improve the company performance, we need different people on the board who actually have the skills that we're looking for and do it in a positive way. That this is that we know they care about the future of the company and we want to help them by making room on the board. And I think we got rid of three shareholder people off the board and put in what I call real independent directors.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, amen. I mean, that's not a reason to offboard someone. And if it is, again, you got to look at the whole process because if being a shareholder means you don't have an off ramp, then you don't really have a board. You just have a play, it's a family council, as you were saying before, it's not the same as a board. And that's a whole different boot camp. What does a family council do? But that's a different thing. You can't, everyone has to be judged by what they can bring to the board and ultimately how they help the company. That's really what everyone should be focused on. And if you think about it, the shareholders should be even more vested in that, right? I mean,
Huh.
they have a a financial interest in the success of the company. Why would you want a board that isn't up to the company? It's just, it's not really rational. Doesn't make sense. So
Okay. Well, I
But
think that
again,
brings us to the,
be sensitive of how you do it.
oh, boy, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the no question.
yeah, yeah. So
Sensitive
yeah,
but insistent.
Mhm. Mhm.
that brings us to the end of the board boot camp. Does anyone have any questions that they have for Joe or Dennis? You can speak up or write in the chat.
They can speak up. I can.
Sure.
All right.
Anyone? Or any closing remarks from either of you?
That was terrific. Really well
No.
organized. Great to be with all of you today. Dennis, great to meet you and have this conversation with you.
Same here.
Um,
I especially compliment Kristen and Daniel on the workbook. It's really well done.
yeah,
There are other books out there, with AI. Just put in, and there's one book that I favorite called the Private Company Board of Directors book. It can supplement what's in the workbook. You guys have been fortunate to get the workbook, which I think was really well done, and it's been a pleasure having this fun conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
No, thank you both so much for joining us and giving us all your expert advice on the independent directors. So with that, I think
thank you.
we will
Take
say
care.
goodbye. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye bye.
All right,
Bye bye.
bye.